Hey. So on this call today, I have the pleasure of chatting with Niluka, who is the founder of ImagineThat. And if you haven't heard about this is the world's first business school for digital nomads and solopreneurs, where Niluka actually helps bored but ambitious professionals transition to working for themselves and working from anywhere in the world through both career and online business support. So without further ado, hey Niluka, it's so nice having you here finally after a lot of arrangements.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Maggie. And it's great you mentioned a bit about Imagine That. Should I start off with a bit about my story, or where's best to begin?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you to tell us a bit more about your whole journey. Should be an interesting story, I'm sure about that. And just how did you end up here and why did you decide to create ImagineThat?
Yeah. So grew up in the UK in Buckinghamshire, just outside of London. Then went and studied at Oxford. Amazing experience. Got to the end of that. Typically, what people tend to go into is law, banking, or consulting if you're going down the corporate route. So I went into consulting. I worked at KPMG. Amazing experience, worked with some really big clients around the world, learned so much. But I got to a point in my career where I thought, okay, is this it? Is there anything else that I'm going to do? And I just challenged myself. I asked myself a question. I said, okay, is it possible to work from anywhere and to work for myself? That was the question. And I decided basically to take a leap. I decided to go and test this hypothesis. And during that time, worked on two different businesses, fully remote. One was a tech startup that we took to market, and the other was a public speaking coaching business. So helping people present, helping them feel more confident, etc. And with that one, worked with over 500 people around the world through workshops and one-on-one. All of that taught me, okay, this is really interesting. It is possible to work for myself. That was the first question. But the second question was, is it possible to work from anywhere? And during that time, when I was working on those businesses, I lived in 7 places around the world, and I'm sure we'll get onto that, including Europe, including Asia. And I realized, okay, it is possible to make money online, progress in your career, and also have location freedom. And I just thought, hold on a minute, why do more people not know about this? And I thought back to me a few years ago in my corporate job, wondering, should I take this risk or not? Is it possible? And now knowing that it is possible, that is what led me on to create Imagine That. So as you say, Imagine That's a business school for digital nomads and solopreneurs. We work especially with ambitious but bored professionals who want to start an online service. So that's the whole thing. So you want to start offering your service online, and we do that through our academy as well as career support. So yeah, as I say, started as an experiment, didn't think that I would end up creating Imagine, but that's where we are now.
That's very cool. And it's actually very nice that you had this opportunity to just test it before, you took the leap and you decided that this will be it. So yeah, that's amazing. Actually, where are you now currently?
At the moment, I'm in Da Nang in Vietnam.
Okay.
I've been in Asia for about 5-6 months. I am coming back to Europe probably over the summer. So
All right, so 5-6 months, this to me sounds a bit like a slow madding rather than, the mad rush of changing destination
yes,
each month.
it's interesting. I'm sure we'll get onto that, but I tend to prefer to stay at least 3 months, 2 or 3 months in a location to get my routine and everything. So I have been in a couple of places in Asia, but I haven't been moving tons, because at the end of the day, if you are building a business, if you're working for yourself, it's very different to traveling, right? You're not traveling. People think you're on the beach with your laptop. You're not. Sorry.
That's the good vision that we all have, but sometimes it's just not working like this, unfortunately. Um, that's cool. So yeah, when you decided to take this leap and try how is it to work from anywhere in the world, what was your first destination? Like, did you do a lot of research before you decided where to go, or was it more like a good feeling you had?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Well, firstly, just to preface this, I never set out to be a digital nomad. Like, I never set out thinking I would be here in a few years' time. Like I did not think I would travel as much as I did. Honestly, I just said, okay, I'm going to do 3 months in my first destination and maybe I'll come back to London. That's the mindset I had. So what I say to everyone when they're thinking about doing this, you know, don't make it this big thing. So I chose Valencia as my first destination. And my reasons were, firstly, I did want to be in a similar time zone to the UK to start. I wanted to be somewhere by the sea, somewhere beautiful, but also somewhere that had a digital nomad community. And Valencia had that. And every time I mentioned that I was thinking about it, people were like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. So I just went, I listened to the feedback and I went for it.
And how long did you stay there when you went?
3 months. Yeah.
3 months. Okay. So this is when you started to developing this kind of preference for longer stays. Yeah, that's cool. Valencia is very amazing. I was actually only once there and it was very out of season. It was like something like December, but even with the rain and, you know, the gloomy weather, it was still very warm and just the atmosphere was amazing. So yeah, I'm also going to be one of those people who say very nice first choice.
Yes, I had a great time there. It has definitely a special place in my heart.
You mentioned a little bit earlier that this is something you say to people to not make this such a big thing, you know, when they decide to start as digital nomads. What advice would you give someone who was in your shoes like you 5 years ago, just thinking about doing this?
I would say, firstly, get the career part sorted first. So I think it's much better to think about, okay, how am I going to make money online? What is it that I am good at? What are my strengths? What value can I deliver to people online? And what problems am I going to solve? And think about that side of things first before you start nomading, right? So when I started nomading, I was working in my tech startup at the time, right? I didn't just go out with no plan. And the reason I say that is, yes, it can be very tempting to say, oh, I'm going to go to Bali and figure everything out. You'll get to Bali. It will be beautiful, amazing. You'll be so distracted. Trying to get into that mindset of kind of careers will be harder than thinking about it, getting the ball rolling. If you can try and get a couple of clients and then going. Do you see what I mean? So that's the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is choose locations that have a community, that have a digital nomad community. When you start doing this, I mean, let's be honest, it's not the standard thing to do, right? It's not the status quo. It is still, it's changing. I'm sure we'll come on to that, but it is different. So the best thing you can do is choose places like a Valencia, like a Bali, that has a digital nomad community. So you see people like you working and enjoying their surroundings. Otherwise, it can feel a little bit isolating and you really can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so different versus, there's other people like me. That's cool.
Yeah, I feel like this is always something very important. And something else that I've noticed is that a lot of people go into this with the mindset of, like you said, me sitting at the beach with a laptop, just chilling and working, whereas I imagine that in reality, this is not exactly the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on that point, you know, I think one of the things that no one expects and one of the maybe misconceptions or myths is that it is maybe an easier option to take. It's like, oh, right, you just, you know, you're not necessarily, particularly if you're an entrepreneur and doing it, right? I know there are people who are working in a company and doing it, but, you know, it's like an easier option to take and couldn't be more wrong. Takes a lot of work to build this lifestyle. And particularly the entrepreneurs I've met, they're very hardworking and very resilient. Because it's hard, you know, it's not easy to be traveling, particularly if you're doing it on your own and starting a business like I've been doing. It's not an easy option. No, it's an adventure, but it's an incredibly rewarding and fulfilling option.
I can imagine, especially for entrepreneurs, as you said, it's not only moving to another place, but it's also taking your whole business and trying to figure how to combine this with the new place where you're staying at. So yeah, this must be a challenge. What other challenges no one talks about? Like, is there something that you've noticed everyone thinks will be super easygoing, but at the end it turns out it's not that straightforward?
Yes, so I would say two things. First is the loneliness aspect if you don't pick the right place. So I spoke about going somewhere with a community. After Valencia, I then went to Croatia. Beautiful, beautiful country, incredible waters, but not really a nomad community. I felt very, very lonely there. So that's the first thing. Second challenge I have encountered, I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about this, was around accommodation. So it is very time consuming and quite a lot of mental energy to be thinking, where's my next accommodation? Like where am I going next? When am I going to dedicate the headspace to figuring that out? How do I know if it's good? Am I going to get the right deal, etc., etc., etc.? And I had first-hand experience of that when I landed in Da Nang, right? And Da Nang has been an incredible experience. But the first time I landed here, I went to my Airbnb after a very long flight, tired at 10 p.m. at night, and it didn't exist.
Oh,
right?
wow.
So I should have known there were no reviews on the listing. Bad by me, but a big warning. But I remember just how stressful it was. Luckily, there was someone there to help in the hostel next door, and eventually I found a hotel, and then eventually I figured things out. But it was so frustrating, you know? And that's why I love what you guys do, right? Because you take a lot of that time and effort and mental energy that you have to have when you are trying to find accommodation away.
Yeah, actually, you're not the first person saying this, because when we were just starting, we were chatting with a lot of digital nomads just to understand what is the main struggle when it comes to, you know, accommodation and planning this. And for some people, we know that some people love scrolling through platforms and choosing their accommodation, but this might be fun if you do it for a vacation, if you do it 2-3 times per year. If this is the way you live, something needs to be made way easier. So yeah, that's why we decided to take the planning stage away from you guys and only put accommodations which exist. So yeah.
It's great. Great.
So you mentioned Spain, Croatia, Vietnam. Where else have you been?
I have also been to Lisbon, Istanbul, Chiang Mai, Da Nang, Koh Samui. Those are places I've nomaded. Then I've also squeezed in trips to Melbourne over Christmas to see my family. And also Tokyo, which I went to about a month ago. Insane place. Would 100% recommend it. So yeah, I must have been to about 8 destinations now. And as I said, this was never the plan. This was never the plan, but it just felt right. And you know what? I would say to anyone listening to this now, if you have the opportunity to go for even 3 months, just do it. And particularly if you have that freedom in your life, just go for it, because you won't regret it.
I 100% agree with this. Sometimes too much planning won't do you good. You just have to go and try it.
Yes.
So you mentioned that the community is very important aspect for you. At the beginning, you also mentioned that when you chose Valencia, it was because you wanted to stay in the same working hours as the UK at the time. So how was this changed since then? What other criteria you have?
Yeah, I think there are 4 main things I look for. First is that community you've already mentioned. The time zone thing isn't one of them now. I am very agile now in how I work. That said, I would never go and work in Australia or somewhere with over 7-hour time difference. It's too crazy for me. But that isn't so much a thing now. So number 1, the community. Number 2 would be, is it somewhere you can work, right? Does it have decent, good Wi-Fi speed? Are there cafes to work in, co-working spaces to work? At the end of the day, this is the difference between nomading and traveling. You are working, so you need to make sure that there are places to work. Third, I would say, is it beautiful? You know, that's maybe a personal thing, but I think most people doing this will want to go somewhere that, you know, is incredible and beautiful in a way. And the fourth thing that is funny, you asked me this question because it's quite timely. Recently, I've also decided I want to be in more business nomad hubs. What do I mean by that? I mean hubs which are for digital nomads, but also have a strong entrepreneurial community too. That is becoming more and more important to me. Probably as well as I grow, imagine, I'm seeing, okay, actually being in these environments is really good and very inspiring.
Yeah, I think that's very, very important aspect, especially we are not digital nomads, but we are working in a startup, and I can see it even when you work in a startup, how important it is to be surrounded by other people who work in the startup who are kind of in the similar situations. You can kind of motivate each other. So yeah, that's a very important factor. So out of all of the places that you've been to, do you say you have a favorite, like your top destinations that checked all of your boxes for the important things?
It's a tough question you're asking me. It's very tough because I've been to so many amazing places and everywhere has been different. Everywhere has had its good parts and its less good parts, right? And often it's the people that make the place. That said, specifically when it comes to working and specifically thinking about what we just discussed, right, around being in a bit more of an inspiring, perhaps entrepreneurial place. With that in mind, two places I would recommend. First is Lisbon. So the first one is probably not a massive surprise to a lot of people, but Lisbon, I mean, beautiful architecture, very different to some other places in Europe, and has a startup community, has, for example, when I was there, they also have these debating societies and these talks, and I just love that, people just discussing cool things. So Lisbon is definitely one. And I think it is becoming more and more a big hub for business in Europe, actually. I mean, obviously, you have London and your Paris, etc. But I think Lisbon is really starting to get up there as well. And the second one is maybe a bit more surprising for people, but the second one would be Istanbul. Now, Istanbul completely surprised me. I thought, okay, maybe I would like it. I wasn't fully sure, but I wanted to try it out, and I loved it. It has such an incredible culture. It's like an immersion of East and West. I felt very safe there. I felt like I could work there very well. There's a lot of co-working cafes. There was a good digital nomad community. Obviously, it's got the business side as well, Istanbul. So I really would recommend that. If you can do Lisbon and Istanbul together, go for it.
It's very interesting that you mentioned Istanbul, because not a lot of people will think of this as a digital nomad destination. Even when we were speaking beforehand and when you suggested Istanbul, I was also surprised at that, because in my head, Istanbul is just a nice place to go enjoy the local cuisine, which is top-notch in my opinion, and just immerse yourself in this culture. But actually, I personally didn't even know that there is a digital nomad community in Istanbul.
Yeah, I was like you. I really was surprised. It took me by surprise, but really, really interesting place and good to work in as well.
That's very nice. Actually, for some people listening or watching to this, I'm not sure in what format you're listening to us. Actually, Niluka created a bundle with us, which is comprised of Lisbon and Istanbul, and it has some of her personal recommendations, which we hide from the rest of the world. So if you feel like this is somewhere where you want to go, I will just leave the link to this in the description and you can just check this out. But yeah, very, very nice. I would definitely start with Istanbul if I was a digital nomad, because it's so unusual. Yeah. Do you think now that, obviously there is this digital nomad movement and more people are doing this, but do you think that specifically the professional world, the world of work, is moving more towards location freedom and just digital nomadism in general?
Absolutely. The world of work is definitely changing. So a couple of months ago, I was talking to a friend slash mentor of mine. He must be at the end, more near the end of his career, right? In his 50s or so. And he was saying to me, Niluka, seeing what you're doing, it just, for me, it's so out of my mind. Because in his day, when he was working, right, you would go to the office, you know, they didn't have these laptops that you could take out, right? So you go to the office, you do your work there. And then he told me the closest thing you'd get to like working outside the office would be maybe you printed off some documents. So literally you printed off and maybe you read it at home and highlighted it, right? And he said, it's amazing now that not only can we work outside the office, which we all know about, right? We can work from home, but it's going beyond that. And I think it's so interesting because the pandemic showed us that we could work and do a lot of our work online. Okay, that was interesting. But then technology continues to evolve. We're seeing more and more countries starting to introduce digital nomad visas. And then there's some crazy stats. So online coaching and consulting is set to reach 350 billion a year by 2035, according to Forbes. Not only that, 1 in 3 professionals are predicted to be nomads or have some degree of location freedom by 2035. That's according to the International Accounting Bulletin. And then the creator economy set to double in size to 480 billion over the next 5 years, according to Goldman Sachs. So why do I give you all those stats? We can see a trend. We are seeing that people are finding new ways to monetize their skills online. They are realizing they don't just need to stick to one location. And as I said, more countries are introducing digital nomad visas. A couple of weeks ago, DTV visa, Destination Thailand visa, you can now stay in Thailand for 6 months legally, work online for something like £215, and then you can renew it again. So the world of work is changing. There is, I think, a bit of a war in terms of people and countries trying to bring in and win the town over. And you know, people say to me, do you think it's just for the younger generation? No, that's one of the biggest things that surprised me with Imagine and my clients and those who come through our academy. They're not all just people very early on, your Gen Z, early millennials. We're actually seeing, yes, of course, those type of people do want more freedom to keep Gen Z, but we're also seeing people who are later on in their career who get maybe 10 years into their career and they think, I am bored. I'm bored. I want to change. But to be honest, I don't want to retire. I don't just want to go traveling. And I know that I'm good at what I do. So how can I start doing that online? And so what does all this mean? It means that if you have a laptop, Wi-Fi, and something that you can offer online that adds value to others, there's no reason why you can't work from anywhere. There's no reason why you can start your own online service. And that is why I feel just so passionately about Imagine, because I see the world of work changing and I see the potential and the opportunity for professionals to make the most of it.
Yeah, I completely agree with this. I feel like it's one of those things which is still so very new to the people that even though it's so obvious, it's very hard for people to go into that. It's actually very funny that you mentioned the chat with your friend that said that how funny it is that we don't have to work in the office. Sometimes because we go a couple of days in the week in the office, we're a very small team. It's cool to just hang out together. But when I go to the office, I'm always with my laptop in my hand because, you know, I don't have a predictable schedule. Maybe tomorrow I will stay at home. And I see those people in, let's say, the subway going to work without their laptops. And I'm always thinking, what do you do? Like, do you have like a static computer at your desk in work? I don't know, it's just in my head, it seems so, yeah, kind of old school. Not that there is anything wrong with this, but it's very interesting how we switch our perspective and how we see things.
Yeah, and I think on that point, the evolution just continues, because I remember seeing an internet cafe, right, in Europe and thinking, wow, once upon a time, right, you would have to go with your computer to an internet cafe, like a designated place, or you would go to an internet cafe and use one of the computers there. This is no longer the case. We have more and more freedom. And that's why I think for people who don't want to give up their career and travel, this is a big option now. And I think that is amazing, because once upon a time, we did have to choose. We would have to take a gap year and then come back to work. But now there is absolutely a way for you to accelerate and continue in your career and also have the location freedom if you want.
Yeah, that's truly amazing. We are thinking about laptops, internet cafes, and productivity. Actually, how does your working day looks like? I think this is always something very interesting to me. Just to imagine what happens, you wake up and then how does your day go?
Good question. And I think it's specifically a question for a digital nomad entrepreneur as well.
Yeah.
Because then there's even more nuance to it. First thing, it does change. So it is not like every day I follow the same routine. I do try to start my mornings with some exercise. So maybe the gym, or I haven't been running much here in Asia just because it's incredibly hot. Try to start maybe 3 or 4 of my mornings with exercise. Then I will either work from home or I will go to a cafe. No, there is no beaches here, working on a beach. So that's maybe a little bit boring for people listening, but I would go to a cafe or a co-work space maybe, or work at home. And then typically I will come back around maybe 3-4 p.m. and take some of my calls if I'm working with clients in Europe. And then normally during the end of the week, maybe Thursday, Friday, I will meet some other nomads in the evening, and maybe I will do some exploring at the weekend, etc. But this is the thing, right? I'm trying to make it sound super interesting, but it's actually, as I say, like, you're working on a business. So it's not like I can say to you, oh, in the morning, I go and on this trek and all of this. Maybe I do sometimes at the weekend or whatever, but most of my time I spend working. And I try as much as possible to bring in routine where I can. So with the exercise, and I try to limit the amount of socializing I do, because I'm a secret introvert and I cannot socialize all the time. That was a big learning for me in the nomad community. So yeah, that's what a day looks like. Nothing is similar.
That's actually very cool. On the topic of routine, like, even though you don't have the same routine every day, do you feel like having some parts of a routine is what makes you stay productive? Because we know when every day is different, it can be sometimes a bit difficult to, stay on top of everything. So what's an advice you would give someone who is struggling to stay productive in this environment?
So very good question. I also think, being completely honest, if you're working for a company, it's a bit different. But if you are working for yourself and nomading, you have to be very self-disciplined. You just have to be as a person, because it is tempting to be like, I'm in a beautiful place, let's go to the beach, or I'm in an incredible place, let's do this. But you have to realize, I think I alluded to this earlier on, you're only getting that because you're working, right? So like, if I ever feel tempted, I'm like, hang on a moment, like, I need to sustain this lifestyle and I do need to work. So, but you do have to be self-disciplined. But other things to kind of stay productive, I think first thing is enjoy what you do. If you enjoy what you do, then it's like, actually, no, I want to like go to a cafe and work on this rather than go explore whatever, because you like what you do. So that's the first thing. Now, of course, there are some nomads doing jobs that they don't actually enjoy. So what do they do to stay productive? I think having a solid work setup, maybe going to a co-working space, or having, like right now I'm using a laptop stand, a keyboard, it's better for my back, etc. So try and have a good work setup. And then I would say, try and find other people who work remotely. That will help you stay productive, particularly, again, if you're an entrepreneur or working for yourself or a small business owner, you can connect with other people. I think we mentioned that, right? That will help you be productive and stay motivated as well, because you're again seeing people mirroring you, seeing people doing similar. And then, as I said, try to find moments of routine, whether it is a gym. So the gym for me has been a constant, regardless of the destination I'm in. right? Some of them have been much nicer than others, but that has been a constant. Maybe another constant for you could be make sure you go to bed at the same time most nights, or maybe you like to do yoga or meditation. Try to bring those parts of routine that you used to do back at home to your nomad life, and that will also help you stay productive.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. And especially if you're staying slightly longer in each destination, like you said, 3 months. 3 months is sufficient time to, find the best gym that's convenient for you, and you can just go, or maybe make a friend with the local barista or anything like this. So yeah, that's very, very nice. Yeah, so since we're approaching the end of our wonderful chat, I just wanted to kind of have a wrap-up question for everyone who is maybe now at their work, they're a bit bored of that. They want to change, or they want to see the world. They just want to change something in their life and become more location independent. So what your advice would be if you have to, summarize it in, let's say, 2 sentences?
You don't try, you never know. And we often regret the things we don't do rather than the things we do. Those were 2 things that were in my mind when I left my job in London and went on this whole journey. I would also say, take the pressure off. Think of it as, like I did, an experiment. And if you have some service or expertise you can do online that adds value, do a little bit, do some market research, do some customer validation. Just break it down. If you're thinking about gaining location freedom, don't say, okay, I need to come up with 5 different places and I need to plan everything. No, just say, you know what? Okay, I'm going to do 2 months in Lisbon. And I'm going to, during that time, see if I can win 1 client offering my cybersecurity service or my law service or whatever it might be. I was working with someone who's a financial advisor. And just break it down. Just experiment. That's the best thing I would say. Take the pressure off. Nothing is going to go wrong. If you have the option to try.
I really love this advice of breaking things into smaller portions, because it can be a bit overwhelming when you think of, changing your whole life with this one move. But yeah, that's a very nice question. Well, you shared so many insightful things during our chat. Where can people go and see a bit more about what ImagineThat does, and just maybe get in touch with you?
So first thing is you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I know that we're connected. You probably see my post there all the time.
Yeah.
I'm a big LinkedIner, if you can call it that. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Niluka Kavanagh, say hello. I also would say you can join our free community. So I think that will be, the link will be in the description. We have 500 people and counting now. So you can subscribe for updates, etc. And then if you are listening to this and you're thinking, you know what? I want to start my own online services business. Then you can join the Imagine Academy. That is a 3-month-long program that takes you through what you need to do to get started. And if you're sat there thinking, I don't know what to do my business in, but Niluka, I want to work from anywhere and or work for myself, then we also have our careers transition program. And that is a smaller program to help people actually become what I like to call unstuck, have a clear plan as to how they're going to change something in their career.
That's amazing. We'll make sure to put all of those things below in the description, so you can be sure it's there and check it. And for Flataway, if you want to learn more about what we do, you can just go on flataway.com or follow us on Instagram at @yourflataway, where most of the time we share all of our updates. And on that note, for updates, just stay tuned, because in the next month, we will be revealing some new projects we've been working on. So this would be something to look forward. All right, Niluka, thank you very much for joining me. And yeah, thank you for listening.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.